Why are Michigan jails so crowded when crime is going down? Michigan Supreme Court Chief Justice Bridget McCormick and Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist are here with answers. And defending the environment. New chemicals and costly cleanups have people worried from Sanilac County to downtown Detroit. Today is Sunday, January 26, 2020, and this is Flashpoint. All right, welcome to Flashpoint. It has been, of course, a historic week for the nation with the impeachment trial of President Trump underway in the Senate. We're going to set that aside this morning. Not to worry, there will be plenty of conversation about that on other Sunday morning programs today. But here at Flashpoint, we're going to keep our eye on two other critical topics this morning. One of them, the environmental worries that have been a near plague on our communities over this very young new year. If you're with us every week, you already know we've devoted a lot of time to the green ooze on I-696 and the dock collapse on the Detroit River. They're just two of the thousands of worries on the radar of the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. These matters have also become the full-time jobs of two of our reporters here at Local 4. And a little later this morning, we're going to talk with Karen Drew and Hank Winchester about what has them most worried, despite state assurances that things are under control. We're going to start, though, with what many Michigan leaders describe as an absolute and necessary priority for our state. Right now, there are nearly 3 times as many people in Michigan jails as there were 40 years ago. It is extremely expensive, but worse, it seems it is a vastly ineffective and often unfair system. A task force was put together to come up with answers for this deeply vexing dilemma. Suggestions are now in. Are they practical? Do they put anyone at risk on either side of the bars? The co-chairs of the task force are the state's Chief Supreme Court Justice Bridget McCormick and our Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist. They're both here, and they're up first this morning on Flashpoint. You know, it really doesn't seem to make much sense. Crime rates are down. In fact, arrests are down more than 20% over the last 10 years. We have a new and growing understanding of mental illness and its relation to crime, and yet our jails continue to overflow. Something is quite wrong, and even in a state with crumbling roads and infrastructure, Speaker of the Michigan House Lee Chatfield calls criminal justice reform his #1 priority. He put together a task force to look for solutions, and they have now delivered 18 of them, and the two leaders of that task force are with us this morning. The Chief Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court, Bridget McCormick, and our Lieutenant Governor, Garland Gilchrist. Thank you both very much for coming. Justice McCormick, I want to start with you because I'm curious, before we get into the nuts and bolts of what you did, this is an interesting position for a Supreme Court Justice to be put into. This is an activist role. Is this comfortable for you?
Let me push back a little. I don't think it's an activist role. The task force was charged with figuring out with data what's going on. Why are our jail populations where they are? Why have those populations grown 3 times in the last 3 decades when our crime is at a 50-year low? And we didn't have statewide data on that before. And then based on that data, with a really diverse group of stakeholders around the table, make recommendations that then the policy branches of government will figure out which of those or how among those they will want to implement them. So I viewed this more as a leadership role in gathering the data and being able to make evidence-based and values-based recommendations.
Okay, and you've come up with 18 of those, and now you're right. Now the hard part becomes what can everybody agree on. But Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist, if you could, what was the most eye-popping finding for you as you started to dig into this problem?
Well, I mean, having the information matters. So we have 83 counties, 81 county jail systems, and all of those data systems with those jails don't talk to each other. But through this process, we now have a clear sense of who's in jail, why, and for how long. And one of the most striking things that came up was that almost half of the people who are in county jail today are there because of suspended driver's licenses or not paying fines related to suspended driver's license. It's the #1 driver of our jail population, no pun intended. And so that's one of the reasons why the first recommendation in the set of 18 is changing the way that we're treating driver's license suspensions, limiting the reasons why we will take someone's driver's license away. So we're trying to have these recommendations be things that will make an impact, that will have an immediate impact on not only people who are in jail, but also the communities in which they live.
And once somebody loses their driver's license, their ability then to, the other problems it creates, their ability to get out of it by, say, working to be able to afford
whatever it is shot.
It's hard in Michigan, as you know.
Yeah.
Most people get to work with cars, and if we're
not our reliable mass transit.
Well,
I understand.
I think that's a different show. But and no one put me on that task force yet. So, but if we are suspending people's driver's licenses because they haven't been able to pay fines and fees related to some offense that has nothing to do with driving safety, it's not clearly going to make it's certainly not going to make our communities safer, and it's hardly going to make them more able to pay those fines and fees that they owe in the first place. If you can't get to work with your car, how are you going to pay what you owe?
Well, what you're, I guess, at a certain point going to run up against with most of your recommendations is that there is a general sense among a lot of people that good people don't get in trouble, that people who find themselves in jail have kind of done something to deserve their way there, and that the best way for us to move forward is people to behave.
Well, part of this is that, people make mistakes, and our system needs to be one where you allow someone to rehabilitate from that mistake or atone for that mistake. But we are just punishing people and punishing them too much. So one of the sets of recommendations has to do with how we're classifying different types of offenses. I mean, our population has gone up, but the crime has gone down. That means that people are committing less crime. So we have to understand then, why are they being put in jail anyway? And these reforms, these recommendations are seeking to change that trend. Do we invest in communities? Can we invest in mental and behavioral health? Because a significant portion of people who are in county jail need those services. Can we make investments in victim services so that we can really protect public safety in the broadest sense? That's what we're trying to do.
I think you found, and I wanted to get to mental health, I think you found that somewhere between a fourth and a third of the people who are in jail have them. I'm actually shocked that it's that low. It feels higher.
Well, to be clear, they have serious mental health.
Yeah, I think most of the sheriffs would put the number far higher for any mental health conditions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what do we do then in a state that many people believe has decimated its own mental health care, way to address mental health care systems? We have, and I've talked this over with a number of sheriffs and police chiefs before, we got a lot of families hoping their loved one gets arrested because they believe that that's the only place they can get some mental health help.
Yeah, and as you know, it's once they're in the jail, at least they're maybe protected from whatever harm they may have been doing to themselves before they were in the jail, but it's hard. It's not usually a place where people get better, right? I mean, jail might be a place for temporary safety. It's not a place where people get better. In fact, there's a lot of data to suggest it's a place where people get worse. And in the meantime, they're not necessarily perfectly safe in the jail, and the sheriffs and the sheriff's deputies are not safe either, having to be the ones in charge of that. We have made the sheriffs and their deputies the frontline mental health workers in our communities, and that's not what they were trained for. It's not what they signed up for, and it's not fair to them.
Then this is one of those areas now where it's going to be difficult to coalesce agreement over how now the state moves ahead and addresses this shortfall.
I don't know.
It's a great recommendation.
I would disagree with that slightly. I mean, criminal justice reform has been the largest area of bipartisan consensus in Michigan since we took office. The Speaker of the House, as you indicated, has said this is his #1 priority. And we passed criminal justice reform. We raised the age so that 17-year-olds wouldn't be treated as adults. We passed reforms to parole medically frail individuals. I mean, we've changed the civil asset forfeiture laws. We want to build on that momentum. And our task force was diverse. It was bipartisan. We had Republican and Democratic legislators. We had judges. We had prosecutors. We had county sheriffs. We had people who work in and administer jails. We had victims' rights advocates. We had survivors of crime. We had people who had been formerly incarcerated themselves directly. This diverse group of people reached consensus that these recommendations were the 18 best ways to improve this system.
Yeah.
That's a bipartisan consensus, and we should build on the momentum that we started in 2019 to make these reforms real in 2020.
Yeah.
Mental health services can be expensive. I'm sure that's right.
No doubt about it.
But jails are expensive too. And if they're not making us safer,
Yes.
throwing more money at them is not necessarily a good way to spend government money. The Speaker was asked a pointed question about this at the press conference last week, and he said, we fund our values. And if mental health services is going to make our community safer and is going to be a more humane way to treat people with mental illness, I trust my government to take care of it.
This will test our values. Another interesting thing is, generally in America, it stinks to be poor. When you're in trouble and you're headed to jail, poverty becomes has a different kind of influence on your ability to pay bond yourself out, on your ability to afford representation. What did you find?
Well, we found that in Michigan, about 50% of the people in our jails are there because they can't pay a bond and so they're pretrial. They have not yet been convicted of anything. They are presumed innocent. Of course, it is the case that some of those folks pose a threat to public safety, and judges have to retain the discretion to make sure the community is safe when someone does pose that kind of threat. But for people who literally can't pay a $200 bond or a $100 bond on a driving offense, it is
to
not.
Spend time in jail for that seems onerous.
It may be onerous to them, and also not clearly better for any of the rest of us. You might want them out going to work, paying taxes, paying child support, paying the things that make them a contributor to our society. So it's not clearly a better system for anybody.
The first 20, you also spent a lot of time talking about the first 24 hours after an arrest. Why is that critical?
Well, part of that is because when we looked at the data, and we found this data, I want to give a shout out to the Pew Charitable Trust, who are a tremendous partner in this year-long exercise with data collection and analysis alongside the task force. But we found that so many jail admissions are for very, very, very short jail stays. And again, with the significant part of the jail population being their pre-trial, we want to give people a right to have a speedy trial and to really push the system to ensure that they can be in front of a judge, that they can have their charges actually heard and argued quickly, because being in jail is disruptive to the community. It's disruptive to the individual person who may be in jail, but it's disruptive to the community as well. It's disruptive to workplaces. It is disruptive to families. And so we need to make sure that we're handling that judiciously, quickly, so that life can go on, that communities can heal, and that we can just be better.
And similarly, that's the same reasoning that goes into the way that you want to reform, or suggesting that we reform probation and parole.
Yeah, same idea. I mean, people on probation and parole are also showing up in our jails in numbers that seem worth our paying some attention to, especially when the violations are technical things. They didn't call in on time, or they didn't. They showed up a day late. It's not clearly making anybody safer to put that person back in jail for a technical violation instead of some other kind of intervention that would allow them to keep contributing.
The last thing I wanted to let you both address, and this is bigger than just the jail part, this is the whole correction system, and that is we seem to be very unable to decide what we want it all to be. Is it supposed to be a place where we just can separate bad people from good people and sort of warehouse people? Or is it supposed to be a rehabilitator that changes people and gives them a chance to come back? Because I think some people would argue that we don't do either one of those things. We're this sort of weird amalgamation of this big corporate system, the industrial prison complex, that really doesn't serve society in either way.
Sure. I think that we need to use all of the tools of our system of justice to protect and increase and encourage public safety. The way that our county jail systems are working right now are not doing that. Resources are being diverted to county jails and instead of mental and behavioral health services and substance abuse systems. We are locking people up because they don't have money rather than because they did something wrong. But if we change this system in the ways that we've suggested, we'll put Michigan on a path to actually having a system that protects public safety, that helps people get the resources and the support and the help that they need to be successful, but it also helps communities be stronger, more vibrant, and safer.
First of all, come to first year criminal law. This is what we talk about for an entire week. What is the purpose of punishment? Yeah. And I think the answer is all of the above, but I think you're correct that we're not necessarily nailing any of those, right? If the criminal justice system has the ability to rehabilitate someone so they don't commit a future crime, that makes our community safer. And it also is consistent with our values. Yeah. There are no throwaway people, my friend, former Speaker Craig DeRoche likes to say, and that's who we are. And so diversion works, deflection works. If we can make people safer, our communities safer by rehabilitating people, we should do it.
It's a massive issue, and I appreciate the work you've done, and I also really appreciate both of you being here to talk about it this morning. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having us.
When we come back, we're going to talk about the environmental problems that have been plaguing Michigan. This is Flashpoint on Local
4. Always there for you. Come experience the Gowling difference at Gowling Alfa Romeo of Birmingham.
For a limited time, lease the 2019 Alfa Romeo Giulia Sport with all-wheel drive for just $329 a month. Hurry into Gowling Alfa Romeo of Birmingham today.
Thank you for calling Randazzo.
There has never been a better time to upgrade your heating and cooling system. Because of our customers, Randazzo is the most reputable, dependable, and most preferred heating and cooling company in Michigan. Right now, take advantage of 0% interest and get up to $3,400 cash back on your purchase. Because only Randazzo gives you the highest value for the lowest price, guaranteed.
Go with the name you know, Randazzo, Randazzo.
When your psoriasis is bad, it can be hard to see what's possible. But the possibilities become clear with Taltz, the first and only treatment of its kind offering a chance at 100% clear skin. With Taltz, up to 90% of those with moderate to severe psoriasis saw a significant improvement of their psoriasis plaques. Some even saw 100% clear skin. Don't use if you're allergic to Taltz. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. Increased risk of infections and lower ability to fight them may occur. Tell your doctor about infections, symptoms, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop, worsen, or if you've had a vaccine or plan to. Serious allergic reactions can occur. See the possibilities. Ask your doctor about Taltz.
Monday at 5. Is a dark, dirty secret hiding in local hotels?
The women are often kept there for days and weeks at a time.
The Defenders exposing shocking claims of human trafficking from motels to major chains. Why didn't anyone notice the signs?
She went to the front desk with blood running down her legs, yes.
What happened next, according to this lawsuit, will turn your stomach.
Find out how survivors are fighting to stop this from happening and the red flags to watch for. Monday on Local 4 News at 5.
We have devoted quite a bit of time on this program so far in 2020 to the long list of deeply worrisome environmental problems that have been cropping up like dandelions all over the place. It has been the near singular focus for two of my colleagues here at Local 4, Karen Drew and Hank Winchester, and they're both with me now to give us some insight into what's happening behind the scenes to also address these problems, but also the fact that they're so glaring because it took some very fortunate, I guess you'd say, public view of them to even reveal what was happening here. Karen, you've devoted most of your time to what's been going on a little bit downriver with Detroit Bulk Storage. Hank, most of your time on the green ooze on 696. Let me start with you, Karen. We've got now the city trying to take some legal action on it. But it seems to me that there's a very large disconnect for both of you over who's in charge and where the authority lies to fix this.
That's well said, because right when this dock collapsed and all that sediment started spilling into the river, and this is right around that Thanksgiving weekend, there was first no communication that it occurred, and then once it did occur, there was no line of this goes to this department, this goes to this department. So there's just some finger pointing, no communication. Eagle, yes, checks it out, but they don't have any teeth to, quote, shut the place down. And then we uncover that this operation's working without a permit and no one even had this on the radar.
Only one of the businesses on the river who apparently have been operating without a city permit.
Well, that's what led us to say, okay, if this is one company, let's just go check. We found a whole nother pile of aggregate or the material that's used to make gravel at another company, and the city goes, oh yeah, they don't have a permit either. So now we're looking for, well, if they don't have a permit, are they paying their bills? And like we reported earlier, they weren't paying their drainage bill. And all of these unpaid bills and unpaid permits mean less money for taxpayers and also no enforcement to know what's going on along our riverfront. This is an international waterway.
Hank, up on 696, the issue that I come back to time and time again, it kind of boggles my mind, I've mentioned on this program, that when the guy who owned the company was finally, as he was being sentenced, he complained in court bitterly about how regulations were killing his business when he clearly hadn't been following them anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, clearly this is a guy who has a lot of problems. I mean, you talk to people that know Gary Sayers. He was a hoarder. He'd been investigated by the local leaders, state, federal, for almost 30 years. And nothing had really been done other than a few tickets, slap on the wrist. But, you know, to Karen's point, I think this is important to mention, you know, in both of these stories, I keep thinking back to Flint. You know, communication was key. Communication is what caused the disaster there, at least from the public standpoint of not getting the information. Here we are a few years later. You think we would have learned the lesson that at least we should be reaching out to the people. You talk to those people in Madison Heights, business owners right across the street, homes a few blocks away. To this day, they've not heard one peep from the state. not one peep from the EPA, and we're on the news every day talking about a potential toxic dump within arm's reach. I mean, I just don't understand how the state, again, is dropping the ball this way.
And to your point, though, about communication, when it all spilled into the river, City Council didn't even know about it because the Army Corps of Engineers found out, and there was no communication to them. They found out about it from some news people, from some advocates.
And on both of these stories, and these are just two of, as we discussed last week with Liesl Clark here from Eagle, about the thousands of sites that they're trying to catalog and worry about all over the state. These are just two of them. Right. But in both of these, they've been doing testing on both of the sites that you've been covering and trying to put us at ease that there's not a problem here that's any bigger, and yet just the same in Flint. How long is it going to be before anybody believes what they're told about the testing? And now, because there have been questions in both of your stories about the way that the testing has been done.
That's right, because EPA is going out on our site along the riverfront Monday morning, and they're checking. They said, okay, we're going to check all over for radiation. Now we're going to look for basements, because as we reported, this is the location where they actually put uranium rods together in hopes of assembling the atomic bomb. And they're like, oh, well, now we're going to test deeper into that green sinkhole. So now we are
Which was the part we haven't even mentioned that developed after the collapse,
right.
The sinkhole
so
behind
8-9 weeks later, and now we're going to do more testing. And it just feels like, why wasn't this done earlier? Why wasn't there a plan in place?
And on the green ooze, Hank, we were told, the residents there have been told that while this stuff may make its way toward the lake, Lake St. Clair, that by the time it got there, it would be diluted enough to not be a problem. Candace Miller, Public Works Director from Macomb County, her memorable way of looking at it was dilution is not a solution.
No, of course not. And again, it's like we go back to Flint. I mean, water is one of our most valuable natural resources. And the minute they discovered this problem, which was towards the end of December, the testing should have been done that day. The information should have gotten to the people immediately. You can expedite a test and get a result in 5 to 10 days. The fact that this happened at the end of December, and the first time there's a town hall or a public meeting about this isn't until February, that makes absolutely no sense to me. I mean, it makes no sense.
The other disconnect that exists here seems to be between the Attorney General's office and Eagle. And who the Attorney General, Dana Nessel, seemed to suggest, well, we're waiting for Eagle to give us marching orders. And it feels like Eagle is saying, well, the Attorney General should be investigated. I mean, there really does seem to be a lack of understanding about how the chain of command works here and who's truly calling the shots.
Very good point. It seems like Eagle wants to crack down, but they don't have the enforcement, and they really don't have the people. I mean, and they don't have enough people on staff at all. And as in reference to the city,
they employ over 1,000 people, and that's not enough given the size of the problem we're talking about.
So that's part of the problem. They don't have the inspectors on a local level because of Detroit River and the permits. They have 10 inspectors and some 15,000 places to inspect. So they don't have the people. So then that's how it all gets backlogged. They say, okay, we need more money, we need more resources. But in the meantime, I'm sorry, I'm a mom, and if I know that uranium is going into the water, even if it is acceptable levels, I don't like it.
And in both of these cases, what has to be done, and I understand it was a different administration, but you have to go back and find out who dropped the ball.
Well, and I'll let you both weigh in on this to wrap it up. I mentioned earlier, the only reason we knew about the green ooze being a problem in there is it showed up on the highway.
Because it was green, thankfully.
The same thing with the dock collapse.
Right.
That was what finally got us to say, what's in all this stuff? So my worry, and what keeps me awake at night on all of this, is what do we not know about what else is in? And none of this is current. None of this was done yesterday. Because of the history of our area and manufacturing that goes back decades, we don't know what's under us.
Yeah. And it's true. I mean, take Gary Sayers, just for example, that one building. He'd been operating there for 30 years. And in most of that time, if you go back, he was on the radar with the feds, with the state, with the local leaders. Yet nothing was done to shut it down until ooze is now making its way onto the roadway a short time after that. So that to me is just unacceptable. When I've got the guy across the street talking to me saying, if I want a building permit, I have to jump through a hoop. This guy's operating like this with this building that looks like a dump. I mean,
it doesn't. Detroit bulk storage.
It doesn't add up. Yeah, exactly.
They did the same thing. They've been on the radar. They've been on the news for not meeting deadlines, having violations, not paying their bills, and somehow it just seems to be okay. And you kind of start to ask yourself, is someone getting paid off? How are they slipping under the radar? Because this can't keep happening.
And the barrels that we saw up in Sanilac County, how many people are just sort of carting stuff off, hoping that it just sort of gets forgotten. Yeah. All right, I'd love to talk to you more, but you both need to put on your hazmat suits back out there. It's just unfortunately not all that funny at the moment. But thanks so much for the work you're doing, and I know it'll continue. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back with more on Flashpoint right after this.
Hi, I'm with Thornton & Grooms.
You guys don't skip a beat. Your annual plumbing safety inspection keeps our plumbing trouble-free, and that is music to our ears.
Get a water heater flush and fill from Thornton & Grooms for $99. We're in tune with your comfort.
Checkers has a new $4.50 Pick 2 meal deal. Pick 2 from the classic burger, spicy chicken sandwich, all-American cheeseburger, or chicken bites. Plus, get fries and a drink, all for $4.50. We don't like to brag, but it's hard to stay humble when we've got one of the best deals in the game. We think this $4.50 deal deserves our bragging rights, but we won't let that go to our heads. The brand new $4.50 Pick 2 meal deal, only at Checkers. Get Checkers delivered.
Is your house cold and drafty? Are your energy bills through the roof? With Michigan's winter being so unpredictable, you cannot afford not to insulate your home another winter. Stop bleeding money. Insulate your walls and attic. Cut your energy bill up to 50% with Ace & Sons.
Always there for you. Come experience the Gowling difference at Gowling Alfa Romeo of Birmingham.
For a limited time, lease the 2019 Alfa Romeo Stelvio TI Sport with all-wheel drive for as low as $369 a month. Hurry into Gowling Alfa Romeo of Birmingham today.
Defender Karen Drew is committed to defending the environment, uncovering the stories, fighting for change. Now, her investigation into Detroit River contamination concerns has zeroed in on one company with multiple violations.
Dock collapses, contaminated soil gets in the river. How in the world does that happen? That the blight tickets are issued right when we started reporting on the story. Coincidence? You've got somebody who owes $62,000 and nobody knows.
Certainly, we take a share of responsibility.
Local 4 and click on Detroit.
I mentioned last week's interview with the head of Eagle, Liesl Clark. If you did not get a chance to see that, you can find that at clickondetroit.com/flashpoint, where you'll find all of our broadcasts. As a matter of fact, that's going to do it for us. Meet the Press coming up next, right after Mitch Albom's Heart of Detroit. We'll see you next time on Flashpoint.